The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Mike Fitzgerald's Dragon Island from R&R Games. Next up, they'll look back at their reviews of Arcane Wonders and Tiny Epic Western in their Dukes Quadruple Take. And finally, they talk about game designers branching out a bit and making games of a different style. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And this is episode 163, which we're calling Tough the Magic Dragon. Thanks to our buddy Daniel Newman, who named this episode over on our Board Game Geek Guild. And we name all of our episodes with the help of our awesome guild members over there. So, of course, this week we're talking about Magic Island from Mike Fitzgerald. And we're also talking about, tough Rootem Tootem Cowboys. Is that the right terminology, Alex?
That sounded close to something that was right.
Or is that what's the IHOP? The IHOP Tutti Frutti something?
What?
There was a breakfast. There was a breakfast dish.
I mean, it's a Little Richard song, Tutti Frutti. Rudy.
Tutti Rudy. Okay, we're way off topic. Anyway, Daniel Newman took a bunch of the elements of our show and put them into that episode title, Tough the Magic Dragon instead of Puff the Magic Dragon. So, yeah, good job, Daniel. And we'll give you the rest of the top 6 episode titles at the end of the episode. So, Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing quite well. Yeah, recovered from Vegas. Didn't take too long to do.
So we had an extra episode last week, episode 162, where we were there for the Unrivaled tournament finals with our good friend Will Wheaton.
Yes, best friend,
of friends
I would
now.
say. Yeah.
It's like he's Bradley Cooper and I'm Zach Galifianakis and you're Ed Helms. Oh my God, you're Ed Helms. You are so Ed Helms.
Am I?
Yeah, you are definitely an Ed Helms of sorts. Anyway,
okay.
Going over to our YouTube channel, and if you listened to the episode last week, you would have heard the Will Wheaton interview, but also we put up the actual video so you could see all of his mannerisms and my mannerisms, and I guess Alex's mannerisms as well.
Oh, that was the point of
that? I don't know. I'm good at promoting our YouTube content, Alex.
Clearly. Yeah, we're good promoters on this show.
Yes.
So it's not like either of us does it professionally.
Well, no.
Oh, wait. Oops. Yeah.
Whoopsie-daisy.
Yep.
All right, Alex, let's talk a little bit about some of the games we've been playing over the last week or so. Why don't you give us a taste? A sweet, sweet taste, Alex.
Yeah, this is going to be over the last couple of weeks. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I actually played this one for the first time before leaving for Unrivaled. Sean, have you played this one yet?
I haven't, and to be perfectly honest, I am shocked that you played this before I did. I own it. Our buddy Nick has been like going mad, no pun intended, except every pun was intended, trying to get me to play this, and we just haven't done it yet.
It was some folks from work. So it was our graphic designer who owns the game, or doesn't own the game, sorry, but hosted the game night.
Okay.
And so there was a nice group of 5 of us. And for folks who don't know, Mansions of Madness is one of these Cthulhu-esque games. It's the 2nd edition of the game. It is, I believe it's $100 MSRP. It's a big game. There's a lot of cardboard in there, Sean.
And a lot of junky miniatures, too. But go on.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, they're junky miniatures. They did not update the miniatures from 1st to 2nd edition. So I'm going to stand by my statement. A bunch of junky miniatures. Thanks, Fantasy Flight Games.
Well, I'm not qualified to judge miniatures because I just usually don't care so much.
You don't have your certificate. That's true.
Yeah. In any case, so this is one that's managed by the app. So basically you're going through a story. It's a cooperative game. You're investigating something together or something's happening and you're looking into it. And I won't talk too much about the scenario we played because there's potential spoilers. I think these stories are pretty well locked in. It's kind of a Time Stories-esque thing where you could play it a second time through, but you're going to know some key story elements and know some shortcuts for sure. So, but there's several of these, and it's managed through the app. You explore the map as you go and add monsters. In our case, there was a pillaging mob running through town that we had to try and avoid, and we're very unsuccessful at avoiding, much to our detriment. It's a mystery solving game at its core. You have to take certain actions. And I got to say, Sean, the way this thing interacts with the app is really, really cool, really thematic, really interesting, really engaging. It provides music, it provides narration, and it creates a really cool integrated experience. I'm trying to think of one that I've thought is more thematic than this. I'm having a hard time thinking off the top of my head of one that tops this on that front. Now, I'm going to say something that you won't be surprised to hear, Sean. This is too long for my taste. Even we played one of the shorter scenarios, and this one took us a good 3.5 hours, I think. It was long. It felt too long, and it was fun. We got into it. It was thematic. We created characters. There's this guy, Ashcan Pete, who we created a very interesting and not Dice Tower approved version of when we were playing.
It's okay. I learned how to bleep stuff with the Will Wheaton interview. So go for it.
Good job. Nice. Well, I'm not gonna go there. I already did that once. You don't have to learn how to bleep stuff when I was overseas that one time.
I sure did. You drunk Shoggoth.
Yeah. Hey, it wasn't me. It was the Shoggoth. Wait, dang it. Anyway. So that's Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Table. It hung around a little too long, but it was thematic, and it was fun for the period of time that it didn't overstay its welcome. But for me, it overstayed its welcome a bit. Sean, I think you're gonna absolutely love this when you actually play it.
Yeah, anything over 35 minutes, I think, is too long for Alex.
Whoa.
But so here's my thought, right? So we haven't really talked about on the show. We have Extra Life coming up the week. So once this episode airs, Extra Life will have been over, although it's not too late to vote. So if you go over to extralife.com, you could search Dukes of Dice. And I think I should pop up there. So you could always donate after the fact. But in the wee hours of the morning, once Empire kind of clears out, that might be a pretty good time to get in some Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. I think that might be a plan. I've got a lot of plans for Extra Life, but I'll talk about that. We'll see how that goes in the next episode. So
you want it to be quieter, for sure.
It's going to be wee hours of the morning. Empire's there's going to be like 12 of us there. Should be good. Should be pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, so that's Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition.
All right. Well, I just got a Kickstarter fulfillment from AV Studio Games and Luda Creations. This was Card City XL, designed by Alban Viard. And Alex, do you recall playing a game called Town Center?
I do recall that.
So it had the little cubes that you draw from a bag, you draft them, and then you build them in your little city. So this is now the second Alban VR game I've played. I've played Town Center. I liked it well enough, but I wound up getting rid of it because no one really liked it all that much. And then Max was like too good at it, like way too good at it. And I do have Clinic, which I picked up at the Dice Tower Con flea market, which I've yet to play. But I backed this Card City XL on Kickstarter, and it is very similar to a lot of Alban's other games, because what you're doing is you're building up this little town, and you're doing it through drafting these different types of buildings. There are industrial, commercial, residential, etc. And it's very similar to Town Center. So you're drafting these buildings, and there are some placement rules when you place them. So like, for example, you're not allowed to place a residence adjacent to another residence, and you can't place a commercial district adjacent to another commercial district. But then after you've drafted these cards and you've played them out, growth can occur if certain conditions are met. So if you have, if you have more recreation areas adjacent to your residential areas, then your residential areas will grow, and you'll get to add an extra card from the stack to it. And then if you have more residential areas adjacent to commercial areas, your commercial districts will grow, and you'll add a card from the stack. The commercial districts give you more money each round. The residential districts give you more points at the end of the game. And then you also need industrial in order to basically power your city. You're limited to a certain number of cards for each industrial card you have, but you don't want to place industrial cards next to residential cards, etc. So enjoyed this quite a bit. In fact, Raquel and I busted this out. We played 3 games in a row. Big hit for both of us. We really enjoyed this. I liked this more than Town Center. What was cool about Town Center was that it was 3D. You're building these blocks, and so instead of just having, a 2-dimensional grid of cards, you had this 3-dimensional city that was building up. That might have been a little much, I think, but doing it just a flat surface, I think was pretty cool. And what's really cool about this is there are three different levels of the game. There's the basic game, the standard game, and the advanced game. So we played 1 basic, we played 2 standard, And then there's also other variants. There's different end game objectives. Like maybe it's just who has the most money instead of the biggest residential areas. So there are a lot of different ways that you can play this game. In fact, if you take the initials of the game, Card City XL, CCXL, in Roman numerals, that is 240. That is how many different ways there are to play the game. Once you have all the different permutations, variants, and different, kind of cute little thing. So yeah, I thought this was great. I've really enjoyed this. I'm excited to play some more games. It's about a 20-minute game, 2 players. I've only played 2 players so far. I feel like that might be a preference for me, but there's some interesting things that can happen with the drafting. It's kind of a cool drafting thing where basically each turn there's a different first player, and that player is choosing 2 piles. It's more I pick, you choose rather than drafting. And so certain cards in each pile are face up and certain are face down based on what the first player chooses. So I thought it was really cool. So that's Card City XL by Alban Viard.
Very good. Sean, I wanted to go back to Vegas for this next one because we played a game. We both played a game.
Oh, my goodness.
And I think, Sean, you had some regrets afterwards, and I had some big regrets afterwards. So this is Busted Blackjack. Of course, we had to gamble when we were in Vegas. And we were looking for a blackjack table. We had some time on one of the days to kill. And Sean, I step up to the table, sit down. You take what? You were on first base. I was on third base. How'd that go?
Yeah, you were on first base. I was on third base. Basically, first base is to the direct left of the dealer. Third base is the direct right of the dealer. At third base, you have, in theory, the most control over whether or not the dealer is busting and whatnot. I like to play third base.
Fair enough. So here's the permutations of the game we were playing. The big key to this is, and one that we didn't realize, Sean, you didn't realize until after you left the table, and I didn't realize until midway through us playing, they took all the 10s out of the deck.
Yeah.
They took all the 10s out of a standard blackjack deck.
Just face cards.
Just face cards. Yep, the entire deck was face cards, so it was a pretty boring game. It was just 20s for all the time and a lot of pushes.
Face cards were your only 10 value cards in the entire deck.
I know what you meant. It was just funny.
And it's not clear anywhere on the table when you show up.
Right.
To be fair, this was kind of early in the afternoon, and so it was kind of slow, and there weren't that many tables open, and so yeah, we show up here at this Busted Blackjack.
The big key to the game is this busted betting space where you can put some amount of money in addition to the amount that you would bet on your hand. I tended to bet $5 there, where if the dealer busts on 3 cards, you get paid. And you get paid based on the third card the dealer busted on. So if the dealer busts on a face card, you get paid 3-1 for that bet.
Right.
But they have to bust on 3 cards or else it doesn't matter, it doesn't pay. And it's separate from your hand. Your hand, as long as people are as long as the dealer is busting, regardless of whether you busted or whatever happened, you're going to win on that bet. So, Sean, you left a little earlier than I did.
Well, let me say this. It helped, well, actually it hurt, that when we first sat down, right before we played, the table had a bust, right? They busted, and everyone made like $60 or something. Off of a $5,
the hand right before we started.
Off of like a $5 bet.
And by the way, the hand after you left, Sean, $40 off of the busted.
All right.
On a $5 bet for me. The big one though, Sean, after you left, was there's a thing in this where if you bust on 3 cards suited, if the dealer busts on 3 8s suited, you get paid 200-1 for whatever bet you put up in the busted space.
Yeah.
Exceedingly unlikely to happen, but certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
Sure.
I don't know what the odds are. They weren't great. Dealer was showing an 8 of diamonds face up. The guy on third base, I'm getting the terminology right, the guy on third base took a hit right before the dealer went. Reasonable decision. It wasn't a bad move. Got dealt an 8 of diamonds, another 8 of diamonds. Hiding underneath the dealer's card was an 8 of diamonds. And they hit, and they busted, but not with another 8. So we were literally, I was 1 card away, Sean, 1 card away from $1,000.
So here's the question. Had that hit, would you have taken Raquel and I to the Gordon Ramsay Steakhouse that night?
Yes.
Well, it's easy to say that now, Alex. I'm curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
I would have been incredibly generous and very humble, and it would have been good for everyone.
So let me say this about this game. This game was terrible. This game was just absolutely terrible. First off, I typically will avoid at all costs any of these like stupid little proposition bets. But when you're at that kind of table, you kind of feel bad not participating in it because I thought it was just like straight blackjack. And there were little signs along the way. Like, for example, someone gets blackjack, usually blackjack pays 3-2. And they're like, oh, it doesn't pay 3-2. I'm like, oh, all right, that's kind of weird. But I figured it had something to do with the odds of the busted bet. There was this other thing where you could bet after you saw the dealer's face-up card. So like if they get dealt like a 3, 4, 5, 6, you're much more likely to win that hand. So you could bet after the fact. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. And then afterwards, when you told me there were no 10s, my mind was just blown. Just blown. Because, I mean, that changes everything. And I was even wondering, like, man, this dealer's just is not busting. But it's a lot harder to bust when there are no 10s in the deck. So yeah, I lost some money there. I lost some money in craps beforehand. But then on Sunday, before we left, I made back all of my money on craps and straight up 2-deck blackjack. That's where it's at, Alex, is 2-deck blackjack. You don't want to do a machine. You don't want to do a shoe. 2-deck blackjack. That's where you do it. Or single deck. Either way.
Okay. Yeah, I was down 200 for the trip. So, yeah, not ideal, but considering it's Vegas, not the worst thing ever.
I was down 600 at one point. But I broke even.
You're a rich lawyer with a lot of disposable income.
No,
Sean.
it wasn't disposable income. These are my grandfather's genes at work. I am a degenerate gamer of all kinds.
Excellent. Well, anyway, that was some Vegas gaming, which we didn't mention on the last episode. I thought we were remiss in doing so because I thought that was a pretty fun game. And I was a card short of $1,000, Sean.
Man.
And you and Raquel getting Gordon Ramsay steaks.
Debatable.
By the way, the Dukes of Dice are proudly sponsored by Gordon Ramsay Steaks. Gordon Ramsay Steaks. He won't yell at you over this one.
That's your worst.
Anyway.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about a game that... So Alex, this is a game by a company called Gray Fox Games. I'm not sure if you're aware of them.
What?
Yeah, so you gave me a copy of this game. It's called Seven Ronin. You gave this to me in Vegas. It is a 2-player asymmetrical game. Takes about 20, 30 minutes to play. And it's pretty good. Of course, for listeners that know, Alex is the chief noisemaker over at Gray Fox Games. But you were pretty certain I was going to like this game.
Yes.
Yeah. So one player takes on the role of a samurai chieftain. The other player is in control of these 7 Ronin who are defending a village. And so in between the 2 players, there is the village, and then you each have your private player mat, which is protected by a screen so you can't see what's happening. Now, as the ninja player, I am placing a certain number of ninja from my pool of 40 ninjas from my reserve onto the board with certain restrictions, onto my private board. At the same time, my opponent is placing his 7 Ronin onto his board, and basically the board is divided into 10 plus 1 different sections of the village. So these sections are on the outside, and there's certain limits there. Then there's the commons, or the green, I think, in the center. And once we're done placing our Ronin, placing our ninjas, we reveal. We then populate the center board with the ninjas and Ronin. And then the Ronin player is able to take their Ronin actions first. Basically, each of the Ronin has a special ability. It could be move this Ronin from this space to this space, or kill one of the ninjas that's in your space. Lots of different abilities. And then the ninjas, if they have survived, are going to be removed from the board, and they're going to be applied as damage markers to the Ronin that's in their village section. And the Ronin all have a variable amount of wounds that they can take before they're dead. At a certain point, if you've dealt enough damage to a Ronin, that Ronin's removed from the game. Now, if there are excess ninjas, or there are no ninjas, or sorry, there are ninjas but there are no Ronin in a square, then they get to basically use the action space of that village section. And so there's some other ways that the ninjas then can manipulate the board. And so basically the object here is to either have the ninjas kill all the Ronin, have the ninjas occupy at the end of the phase 5 different sections, possibly 3 sections, depending on some special areas. And then the Ronin are just trying to pretty much survive the onslaught. Once the ninjas run out of reserves and they've eliminated all the ninjas, that's game. So yeah, okay, so let me say this. The rulebook was rough. It was a rough rulebook. It was very much a wall of text, and then there were a bunch of these little call-out boxes which had important, vital information in them. They weren't like reminders necessarily, or they weren't like, oh, just so you know, but they were important pieces of information. And it was a weird rule book. I found a couple typos too. There was like just an extra V somewhere. Anyway, the gameplay itself, though, I thought was really solid. I like the art. The art of it was really good, but the gameplay was pretty solid. I like this kind of tactical gameplay, the kind of hidden assignment of units to the board. And it's interesting because at a certain point, the Ronin want to protect a certain area. So I mentioned before there were some special areas. There are these 2 fields, and if the ninjas occupy the 2 fields, they count as 3 of the 5 spaces, not just 2 of the 5 spaces. So at a certain point, those fields have to be protected by the Ronin, but I might place a bunch of ninjas there hoping to kill off whatever Ronin get assigned there. So there were some very interesting decisions here, and there were some interesting ways to deploy all the different units and take advantage of all the different special abilities. But I will say that it takes there's a bit of a learning curve here. Like for that first game, I almost completely ignored what the Ronin can do because it was just too many variables for me. And I was just concentrating on here's what I'd like to accomplish. I lost horribly. Like I did a terrible, terrible job, but I liked it. And I'm happy to play it again. And it's fairly quick. In fact, I was looking to play it again last night at the end of the night, but everyone kind of pooped out. So I'm interested to try it again. So you're not allowed to say anything about it.
What else didn't you like about it?
What else didn't I like about it? No, I'd just say the rulebook was probably my main issue.
All right.
That's it.
Okay.
No comments from Alex, though.
No comments on the game.
Talking about Gray Fox games.
I apologize sincerely to one very specific listener.
Okay. Is it Josh?
No, it's not Josh.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he listens. Anyway.
Oh, okay. Anyway, that's 7 Ronin from Gray Fox. Is it available now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can get it on... Wait. Am I allowed to comment on this? Yes, it's available. It's been out for a while.
Just that's enough. It's available.
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. Last night at Jamie Stegmeier's, I got in a play of something that is, I think, only published currently overseas. It's from Le Bois de Jeu, which I hope I pronounced that right. I think I came close anyway. And it's a game called Ilos. And this is a tile placement exploration economic resource management game, about a 45-minute one. It's not a particularly heavy game. Game looks gorgeous. Game looks great. Basically what you're doing is you are placing out tiles and putting boats on them. You're then using cards in your hand, going to try and build resources and build a resource engine that's going to get you enough things, manipulate markets, and at the end of the game, you score points based on the value of the goods you still have. So if I have, say, 3 gold, and gold is valued at 6, that's 18 points at the end of the game. If I have 3 spice, and spice is valued at only 2, that's only 6 points. So it's an economic management game. It's a resource it does a lot of those kinds of things. So we got this to the table with 4 players, and it kind of fell a little flat. And it kind of fell a little flat, Sean, because it didn't feel, oddly enough, restrictive enough. It was a little too easy to move the boats wherever you wanted to at any point. That you are drawing in this game somewhere in the range of at least 4, but usually up to 8 cards at the end of your turn. And so cards build up in your hand fairly quickly. And because there's enough different stuff in the deck, typically you can do just about anything you want on the turn as long as you have the cards to pay for it. Because you pay for actions with other cards is how this one generally works. Yeah, it was all right. But if this one does make it over to the U.S., it's not one I'd recommend. But that's one I tried straight from Essen. That's Ilos.
Well, so let me just correct you. It's not Bois de Jeu. Bois de Jeu is the online website that you can play different board games on. This is from La Bois de Jeu.
That sounds pretty close.
Well, but they have it's literally twice the number of words.
Fair.
No, wait, it's not. That's not true. It's 1.3 times the number of words.
Great. Excellent. Fantastic job.
They're two different things, though. They're 2 distinct entities.
That's Ilos, and I played it, and that's back to you, Sean.
Okay, back to me. Let's talk about a little game called Raiders of the North Sea. This is brought out here in the U.S. by Renegade Games, designed by Shem Phillips, and this game is awesome. This was one of the nominees for the Kennerspiel, right? Kennerspiel
yes,
this year?
It was. Mm-hmm.
Kennerspiel des Jahres. And remind me, Alex, what your take on this game was.
I played this one at Dice Tower.
Yep.
Because I was playing a ton of new games at Dice Tower, and Sean was busy doing his giant epic games of whatever.
I was combat commanding.
Yeah, you were combat commanding for a lot of it, and then the other half of your entire time there was taken up by that one game of I'm blanking on it. I shouldn't be blanking on it.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
It's the one game that always takes forever that you always play every year.
Oh, Kemet?
Kemet, yep.
Oh, you mean my number one game? Okay.
Yes. Anyway.
You mean my number one and possibly my number two game for next year? In
fairness, I played like 13 games of flip ships at that con and a baseball highlights tournament, so there you go. Yeah, I got into play of this one, Sean, and I didn't have the same take as you did. I liked it a lot.
That's what I thought.
I liked it a good amount, but not a ton.
Good amount.
Not a lot. I liked it. I'd say I liked it.
Good amount, not a ton, but you liked it.
Translate that for the listeners.
I don't know what the heck you're saying right now.
I liked it.
So, Raiders of the North Sea is a worker placement game. It's got a Viking theme. And what's really cool about this is that when I place out one of my workers, I take that action, and then I'm able to recall a worker that's already placed on the board to take that different space's action. So you have at the very bottom of the board the different village spaces. And so there are spaces where you get different types of resources, you get gold. There are spaces where you can hire these different crew members from your hand, which give you different special abilities. And initially you start off with black workers who are your very basic workers. And then eventually you can use those workers to go raiding, and raiding will give you different white and gray workers, which have different uses and different places they can be placed. And you are trying to score the most points, glory, victory, whatever. It's victory points of some kind or another. And you're doing this by attacking and raiding these different villages, these monasteries, these fortresses, and you get different benefits for doing so. And it's all randomly seeded. So there's these different resources that are seeded on all these different locations. There's also these skull tokens, which means when you attack that fortress or that monastery, for every skull token that you take, you're going to have to kill one of your crew members. And that sounds terrible, except that there's this cool Valkyrie track where as you move up it, you're scoring a ton of points. And then some of the abilities on the cards might key off of them dying. They give you more points for dying or give you some other benefit for dying. I thought this was fantastic. I was shocked. So it's a tiny box, right? It's like, I don't know, it's like a 7x7, 8x8 box, but there's a huge game in this box. And the worker placement aspect to the game, the place out, get a benefit, and then pull back to get some other benefit, was really cool. I am really interested in playing this game some more, and I'm really interested in trying the other two games in this trilogy. So yeah, it was.
Have you played Coldwater Crown yet?
I haven't played Coldwater Crown. I know has a similar mechanism.
Has the one in, one out mechanic. And
right.
And to me, because I'd played Coldwater Crown first, I think it hooked me a little more than this one did.
Hooked! Because it's about fishing.
Kind of intentional.
Was it?
Kind of.
Okay.
Coldwater Crown, I think, does that one in, one out mechanic a little better than Raiders does. But if you've only played Raiders, or if you have no interest at all in the fishing theme, and I'm not a big fishing guy, I could absolutely see if I'd played Raiders first, I would have probably liked it a little better, and I think it just suffered a little in comparison because they both use that pretty similar mechanic. Sean, I'm curious if you actually get Coldwater Crown to the table, what you think of that one, and how those two compare for you.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's one where the theme just doesn't quite call to me. And I almost feel like people that have been turned off by a game like Rococo about like the dress and suit making, the fishing, I've fished quite a bit, but it's not something that now as an adult I'm going out to do myself. So I don't know.
You're not a baseball fan either, though. And Baseball Highlights 2045 first mention is a Boxcars Award.
No, I don't follow baseball, but I enjoy watching baseball. I'll watch baseball if it's on TV. I love going to baseball games. I just don't follow the major leagues or anything.
Well, come on out here. I'll take you to a cards game.
Boo, cards.
Well, okay. That's fine. I don't know. Who are you cheering for?
No one. Go Astros, by the way. Woo.
Okay, yeah, a couple Albuquerque guys on that team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Alex Bregman and Kenny Giles, both from Albuquerque.
I like baseball well enough. I played a bunch of Little League. It's fine.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, that's what we played. Let's head on over to the news desk.
All All right, this is a Sean week for news. In other words, Sean put all this stuff in here, and I'm going to catch up on the fly. Let's see how this goes. First up, BoardGameFinder.net. And Sean, what does this site do, and what makes it so special and interesting and cool?
So a lot of times, if you're on any of the Facebook groups or you're on Reddit or you're on BGG, someone's like, hey, I like the mechanics from this game, or I like this theme or whatever. What are some other games that people can recommend? And then they get, deluged with a bunch of people saying, oh, don't you know how to use Google, or don't you know how to search BGG or whatever? So now you could go to BGG and you could certainly do a search and you could put in a bunch of mechanics, but this is kind of cleaning up that whole interface on this new website, BoardGameFinder.net. So Alex, have you gone over there yet?
Nope.
So, all right. You can go in and you can just type in a name of a game or a type of mechanic, and then it's going to spit out a bunch of recommendations for you. So like I just typed in worker placement and then recommended for you Caverna, Agricola, Lords of Waterdeep, Orleans.
I'm trying this right now live as Sean's describing this, by the way.
You're doing it now?
Yep, right now.
What'd you put in?
What do you think I put in?
Baseball highlights.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So what came up as recommendations for baseball highlights?
It recommends Baseball Highlights 2045 Super Deluxe Edition.
Okay.
It also recommends Bottom of the Ninth, which I own and is a lot of fun. It also recommends Pizza Box Baseball, which I have not heard of and I'll look into. Recommends Stratomatic, which I'm familiar with. It recommends Harry's Grand Slam Baseball Game, which I have played and is... It recommends Fog of War from Jeff Engelstein.
Okay.
Don't know why.
Two-player... Okay, yeah.
It recommends Automobiles, which I haven't played. It recommends Rollin' America. It's multiplayer solitaire.
Weird.
And it recommends Hoplomachus, The Lost Cities.
Okay.
And a bunch of other stuff, including Pit Crew, also by Jeff Engelstein.
Okay, that's weird. So you can click on the results to get more information about the game, as well as player count, length, weight, BGG rating, etc. I think it's definitely worth a look. I think it's probably a better tool for people that don't necessarily consume a bunch of board game media. Like, it's not necessarily something that our listeners would benefit from because they're already kind of in the know, so to speak. But I think it's a pretty interesting tool, especially for newer gamers just getting into the hobby. Because I see those all the time on the Facebook groups. Hey, I really like Orleans. What are some other games people recommend for me? Just go there, type it in, spit it out. Sounds interesting.
All right, Sean, I have a challenge for you.
Okay.
I have just searched for Patchwork on BoardGameFinder.net.
Okay.
Can you name, so I have the top 6 right in front of me. How many of the top 6 can you name?
Okay, so Cottage Garden.
It's not on there.
Oh, okay. Well, then Barron Park.
Nope, it's lower on the list, but it's not. It's I think that's in the 20 range, 20s, somewhere in there.
I'm confused. I don't know. Then I'm. Oh, okay. It's a bunch of Fields of Arla, Feast for Odin, Mintworks.
Nope.
What?
Nope. I'll tell you. And one of these I think is a fair guess. The rest of these are a little out of left field. So Codenames, 91% match. Seven Wonders Duel, Splendor, Carcassonne, Potion Explosion, and Pandemic Legacy Season 1. Those are the top 6 results.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling my results from yours are different. And I think it's based on inputs that we've put in and things that we've looked up. I'm not sure. That's worth some further inquiries, I think.
It's possible I need to add several games instead of just one game. I don't know. But it's a weird set of results for just Patchwork.
Okay. So anyway, that is BoardGameFinder.net.
Next up, Asmodee North American Fantasy Flight are launching a new division, Fantasy Flight Interactive, which is going to take popular board games and turn them into full video games on various platforms. Sean, this could be some pretty interesting stuff. There's some interesting names in the mix here.
Yeah, there certainly is. So, like, for example, in the past, we've got a game like Battle Lore, which I think has a fantastic app implementation. And it kind of expands a little bit on what you're able to do in the board game, and it changes it. It's not a true port of the game. And it's interesting the decisions that it makes. Basically, so it's a commands and colors style game where you have these 3 sections. and you play different cards that basically let you activate a certain number of cards in each section. But because of the nature of the app play, it changes how that works a little bit. And so I think that it's interesting to say, hey, we're not necessarily just going to take a straight port of a board game into an app or video game. And it sounds like that's going to kind of be happening here. So Fantasy Flight Games will continue to produce their typical hybrid games like you were talking about earlier, Mansions of Madness, Descent. By the way, I still really need to play Descent with the app. I feel like there's some awesome stuff there. But they're looking through Fantasy Flight Interactive to create more expansive video game products. This is going to be led by Tim Gerritsen, whose resume includes video game hits such as BioShock Infinite, Prey, and Rune. And if you want to read the rest of the Fantasy Flight press release, it's over on their website. So yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. I think that's a natural step for the company, don't you?
Yeah, no, and I think we've started to see this with a bunch of companies slowly but surely. You see someone like North Star Games put out Evolution, the video game. That just was just wrapped up on Kickstarter a little while ago. And I think it's a direction you're going to see companies head more and more, for sure.
Yeah, and then also in that press release, there's also some information about some kind of corporate rebranding and logo changes and things like that. But that's less interesting for the podcast. So
I'm interested in that stuff, but that's just me being interested professionally. So probably not interesting for everyone else. Anyway.
Go take a look at that, Alex.
I will take a look at that, but I won't bore everyone else with that. All right, finally, the Kickstarter of the week. Plan 9 From Outerspace deck building game from Grim Games. This is based on what has been known by some as the worst movie of all time. Sean, this is actually a movie I have seen.
I had a feeling
I've seen that
you've seen this.
I haven't seen Aliens, but I've seen Plan 9 From Outerspace. 1959 movie from Ed Wood, and this movie is definitely infamous. Infamous in terms of the production. One of the guy playing Nosferatu wasn't the guy playing Dracula who like kept holding something over his face for half the movie?
Yeah. So let me ask you this real quick before we get into this game. Have you also seen Manos: The Hands of Fate?
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, so that's another one that typically is listed as one of the worst movies. So I've seen Manos: Hands of Fate actually pretty recently. I don't know that I've actually seen the entirety of Plan 9 From Outer Space. I know I've caught bits and pieces of it here and there. But yeah, this is an interesting IP to make a deck building game out of, because that's what this is. It's a deck building game, Alex. That seems kind of weird to me, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't this a weird IP to make a game out of?
Yeah. It's definitely an odd one because it's not a movie that's first in mind. I felt the same way about Big Trouble in Little China, by the way, but I also hadn't seen that, so...
That's a cult classic, and that movie's fantastic, and you should just shut your dirty mouth right now.
I would say Rocky Horror Picture Show, if they made that into a board game, that would be kind of funky.
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting. So this deck building game, if you go to the Kickstarter page, it's not quite clear how the gameplay works. So they talk about these different aliens and enemies and whatever moving through different locations from the movie, but it's not quite clear how the actual card play gameplay works, if there's different types of currency or what. I couldn't make heads or tails of how it played, even though there's this whole how to play section. So yeah, it's got stills from the movie, which I guess is fine. Although it'd be interesting to see like color drawings, color comic style art or whatever, but they just use stills from the movie. The graphic design of the cards itself is a little rough. It looks like a rough project, Alex. And yeah, okay. So it ends November 24th. So by the time, right now when we're recording, that's about 3 weeks away. It has currently made about $4,000 of its $13,000 goal. And if you want to pick this up, it is $37 for the base game, 200 cards, a paper game mat, Alex, a rulebook, molded plastic insert to organize your cards, and then a deluxe collectible box. There's also a deluxe version, which is $62.
So I was looking through this project, Sean, and they have two quotes that I can find. One quote is from someone saying, hey, if you like Legendary and Ascension, you'll probably like it a lot. Here's 3 quotes. There's one that says, I love the look of this game. Plan 9 is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I can't wait to own this. That's another playtester feedback. But my favorite comment is, why would you make a deck building game out of this awful movie? That's from Carl, one of their playtesters. That's an interesting quote to use. I like the humor to kind of laugh at yourself with that. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Sean, I don't know about this one.
So if you want to get this game, you better go back it, because according to the Kickstarter page, it will only be available through Kickstarter, which is kind of a recent trend, I think. Or it's not, well, I guess it's been happening, but even for some of the bigger games like Seventh Continent, they're not intending to have a major retail presence. Really, you got to just back it through Kickstarter. So yeah, go check out Plan 9 from Outer Space if that sounds interesting to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little ways short of its funding goal. We're talking about 4,400 raised out of the 13,000 out of the time we record. So yeah, it's only going to get funded if folks jump on board. And they're going to need some help for this one. There's no doubt.
Is that how that works? Things only get funded if people fund it?
Yes. Thanks,
okay.
Sean.
Just checking.
I'm very witty tonight. I don't know if anyone could tell.
Yeah.
Oof. One other bit of news, though, before we get done with the Kickstarter. And hey, this seems like a good place to actually do show news, is in the news, right, Sean?
Sure, why not?
So let's talk quickly about something we have up during the Jack Vassal Memorial Fund auction. And that is a Dukes of Dice experience. Sean, what are we providing for this fun thing?
So we're going to be available at either Gen Con or Geek Week of the West in 2018. And if you want to play a game of your choice, within reason, I forget what you put on the entry, but
I think like a 3-hour max I put on there, which is apparently about 6 times my attention span. So.
Exactly. So if you want to play with the Dukes, you can do that. You can bid over there, and we've got a bit of a bid war going on over on the Geek List page over on Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But it also includes a Duke City and a Gateway City Care package. So at least on the Duke City side of things, you're going to get some Albuquerque green chili and some Albuquerque tortillas. Last year, our buddy Patrick Hillier won, and we played Terraforming Mars with him at BGG, and he got some of the green chili and the tortillas, so to speak. And then, Alex, have you figured out what's part of the Gateway City Care package?
I have figured out one of 2 pieces to include in this Gateway City Care package. Number 1 is going to be Ooey Gooey Butter Cake Mix, which is it's a specialty kind of cake you'll find in a lot of coffee shops here. It is real good, real good, and this will give you the ability to make it fresh where you are, because if I tried to ship the actual Ooey Gooey Butter Cake, it would probably be pretty stale by the time it got there. So that's one part of it. I mean, I could ship frozen custard, but that would require some dry ice and some finagling. So I'm still trying to figure out the second part of it, but we're working on it. Maybe some Provel cheese, the St. Louis style cheese. But yeah, you'll get something very St. Louis-y as the second thing too.
So yeah, if you don't know, the Jack Vassal Memorial Fund is about gamers helping gamers. This is the 3rd or 4th year we've been participating in this. And so it's a fantastic cause. There's lots of cool stuff to check out over there on the Geek List over on BGG. So definitely go check that out, and you could get some cool stuff and support a good cause while you're at it. So yeah. And then also just want to mention real quick that the Dukes do have a Patreon drive going, as we always do. If you go over to patreon.com/Dukes of Dice, you can help support the Dukes. We have a lot of amazing Patreon patrons that help out with hosting costs and review copies and things like that. Really appreciate all of them. And if you're so inclined, we would love your support over there as well. Anything else you want to talk about show business, Alex?
No, I think we're good. Let's get to that review. That's going to do it for the news.
So, Alex, are you a fan of bluffing games?
Certain bluffing games.
Okay. What's one of your favorite? Way to set up the bit here. So, what's your favorite bluffing game, Alex?
It might be something like Sheriff of Nottingham. Oh. Is that what you're trying to lead me to, Sean?
It sure is, Alex. You're really good at this. So we wanted to highlight the fact that a new expansion for Sheriff of Nottingham is coming out from our friends over at Arcane Wonders. It's called the Merry Men expansion, and this contains 5 modules that can be added to the base game and adds in the option of a 6-player as well. So in addition to having that 6-player, you can also play with deputies in the 6-player games, where instead of having a single sheriff, these deputies are added that can also be searching bags of some of the other players. The Merry Men module adds new illegal goods in the form of Merry Men characters. If they're successfully smuggled in, players will reveal it and activate certain special abilities. That sounds really cool. There's also the Black Market module. This adds 3 sets of bonus cards that display illegal goods. The first player who successfully smuggles the indicated goods receives the bonus cards and a large reward. And then finally, as a lawyer, I love laws, Alex. You know I do, right?
Oh, yeah, you're all about laws. I hear you talking all the time about laws and legal things and laws.
Law this, law that. Well, the last module is laws. The sheriff must draw 3 law cards and choose 2 to keep. The chosen laws are in play for that entire round. Lots of cool stuff here. Sheriff is a game that I love myself, Alex, you love, and I think this expansion sounds really sweet. It's available now.
Arcane Wonders, it's never a blunder when you go with Arcane Wonders. This week we're talking about a Mike Fitzgerald game, but it's not Baseball Highlights 2045. It's not even a card game. It's a full-on board game where you're exploring the world, trying to gather resources, capture dragons, or make them your faithful companions, all while digging for treasure. Is this game a treasure? We'll tell you, it's Dragon Island.
In Dragon Island, you are taking on the role of a wizard who is trying to capture and tame dragons. As you capture these dragons, you're going to be gaining some points. As you tame them, they become your pets and you get some cool little special abilities from them. All the while, you're also looking for treasure, and when you find treasure, you're going to get some more points, you're going to get some gold, which you'll be able to use to do some of the other things in the game. So at its heart, Dragon Island from R&R, designed by Mike Fitzgerald, is a tile-laying game. Every turn, at the end of your turn, you'll be drawing new tiles. You'll have a couple tiles in hand, and then at the start of your turn, that's the very first thing you do. You add to this shared board of tiles. And the game starts with a wizard's keep in the center. Everyone has a starter tile matching their particular player color. And then these other tiles are going to get added to this main board. And there are mountains, plains, forests, and lakes, islands. They're blue. One way or another, they're blue. And then you also have these wild tiles, which you can assign a color as you place it. And the really cool thing here is that the tiles are double-sided. So on one side, it might be a red mountain tile. The other side, it might be a white plains tile with some different available actions on the different sides of the tile. Now, when you place this tile, you're going to get these cubes. These cubes are your energy. And so if I place a red tile, I'm going to get 1 red cube. And if I'm placing it adjacent to a white plains and a green forest, I'm going to get a white and a green cube as well. I need this energy to build buildings. I need it to also capture dragons throughout the game. After placing those tiles, I then have to populate the board with any dragons based on what the different tiles say. So on some blue tiles, it might say, hey, pop up a blue dragon, or a green tile, pop up a green dragon. Sometimes there's even some cool double dragon tiles, which I kept saying, double dragon, every time they popped up. And so you'll populate these dragons, and then you have an opportunity, if you want, to move some of these dragons to different tiles by paying gold. But be careful, because gold can be pretty scarce, and you may need that gold to do other stuff. Once you move the dragons, if you so choose, you can then move your wizard. And the wizards move in some interesting ways. I'm not going to go into full detail on how they move. I will simply say that it is less restrictive than you might think. It's quite easy to get from one side of the board to the other, but it's not necessarily, you're not always able to just freely move wherever you want. There are some certain restrictions, but there's some teleportation. As you tame dragons, you're able to actually fly them to their preferred terrain type and then kind of slide off to an adjacent tile. It's pretty neat that way. So once you move, if you wind up where there are any dragons, you've got to deal with those dragons. Otherwise, you're in for some rough times. So there are 2 ways to deal with dragons. One way is to tame a dragon. So to tame a dragon, you need to have 3 gold. Then you take that dragon, you take that dragon's color card of yours, and you place the 3 gold on it. At the end of the game, if you still have gold on that dragon card, you're going to score a point for each gold. That dragon card is also going to give you that ability to move to that dragon's color tile on the map. And depending on which color dragon it is, it'll give you some sort of special ability. So like, for example, the white dragon will make it a little bit cheaper to build buildings. The gold dragon will give you more points whenever you find the different treasure map, whenever you complete a treasure map objective, essentially. So now you can tame those dragons, but you can also capture those dragons. So if you spend 10 active energy, Alex, not just energy, but active energy. Active energy is defined as the type of energy that's the same color as the tile you're on and all the adjacent colors as well. So if I'm on a green tile and there's an adjacent white and red, that means green, white, and red are all considered active energy. I spend 10 of this and I can capture all of the remaining dragons on my tile. So if there's 12 dragons there, I just capture them all. You would probably win the game at that point. You're going to score some points based on the different colors of dragons that you're able to capture. Basically, the first time you capture a red dragon, it's worth 2 points. All subsequent red dragons are worth 1 point. So that's how that works. Then, once you've dealt with all the dragons, you're then able to take the action of whatever space you've landed on. So it could be look for new treasure cards. It could be use this telekinesis ability, which gives you a bunch of energy and gold, depending on where you're situated. You can also build buildings, and there are 3 types of buildings you can build. You can build a spire, a power spire. What's it called?
Energy spire,
Energy spire, there you go. Energy spire, which basically makes that hex worth more energy or gold when people activate it, or when people place or use the telekinesis ability. You can also build a dragon's pen. You have 1. And basically, that dragon's pen is going to let you collect a bunch of dragons. So as you move dragons to that tile, you have exclusive rights to those dragons. People can't move them off. People can't capture them. People can't tame them. They are yours to do with as you please once you eventually get around to it. Finally, you can build a dragon's lair, which will protect your pet dragon of that color. So throughout the game, only 1 red dragon's lair can be built, only 1 green dragon lair, etc. can be built. And at that point, you'll never lose gold from that dragon. The way that you lose gold is when players play a tile from hand that has this little typhoon symbol. Everyone else's dragons, if they're not protected by the lair, lose a gold. All right, so you've done that. Now, if you are on the correct spot, you can reveal a treasure card from hand. Basically, you're looking to be in a certain terrain type, surrounded by a certain number of other terrains as outlined on this card. If you meet that, you get the gold, you get the points, and then you draw a new tile. Your turn is over. You play till all of the tiles in this draw bag have been played out onto the board. Add up all your points. By the way, you're getting points for buildings. Whoever has the most points is the winner of Dragon Island. Holy cow, Alex.
That was long.
What I just did was I went through all of the 8 steps in turn order. And I did that for 2 reasons. One, of course, to kind of give us an idea of how the game is played, to give us some context for the rules, or rather for our review, but also to kind of go through what the game kind of feels like and having to go down that list.
Yep.
Am I right there?
You're right. And by the way, that's the best way to teach the game, in my experience, is if you go through a turn, by the end of going through that turn, you've pretty much taught the game.
Exactly. So, Alex, what are your first impressions, your general thoughts of this game? Uh-oh.
Sean, I have been utterly dreading this particular review the entire day ahead of this episode.
Crikey.
Here's why.
Wait, real quick. You gonna do our little disclaimer here?
I was going to do the disclaimer. You just jumped all over me on the disclaimer. Come on, man.
Away. Good sir.
Here's the disclaimer. Disclaimer number 1, this was 1/2 of a review copy. And what I mean by that is Sean received a review copy for this, courtesy of directly from Mike, actually.
Yes.
And I went and bought my copy of this from Miniature Market, where Grey Fox's offices are currently located, but not for long. In any case, 1 review copy of the 2. I did not receive the review copy, but that's a full disclosure. Here's the other full disclosure. Mike, for any longtime listeners of the show, is one of the favorite interviews I've ever had on the show. He designed my favorite ever game, Baseball Highlights 2045. Not first mentioned. I've mentioned it several times, but I've showered that game with love and affection because it deserves it. And Mike, in general, I've developed a pretty good friendship with him. It's a similar Jamie Stegmaier kind of situation. When I was leaving to head out towards eventually Gen Con, I stayed with Mike and his lovely wife, Helene, and they put me up and were hospitable, and we played games. And Yeah. Any case, that's the long disclaimer. I think Mike's an awesome dude. I thought he did great work on Ludology. I've loved getting to know him. I love when I get to see him at cons. I think Baseball Highlights 2045 is tremendous, and I love Diamonds too. Why I'm dreading this is because of some of my first impressions of the game, or what I'm going to talk about here. This is more of a Sean game than an Alex game, for sure, by a million miles. I've got issues with this game in terms of a lot of things. Production, the amount of potential for AP and length of turns, and some thematic issues with this one too. Those are the broader thoughts. I think there's a core here that's really cool and interesting, and I think, for instance, the active energy is an interesting concept. The buildings interact and work in different ways. I like how the dragons provide you different abilities, and there's clear multiple paths to victory. And for me, I have too many other problems with the game to get by that. And we will absolutely talk through them, and I am sick to my stomach in this moment right now.
Oh boy. All right. Well, yeah, and I'll just echo some of those disclaimers of yours. Again, review copy for me. And yeah, Mike has been, I think, a very good friend of the show, but I'd also consider Mike a personal friend. So just kind of want that relationship that we have with Mike out there, so people are just aware of the review. Yeah, I think definitely, I knew going into this that I was going to like this more than you would. There are some really cool things that this game does. I think in the end, it doesn't wow me. I'm a big fan of Mike. I love Baseball Highlights. I love Diamonds. I love Mystery Rummy. I love Wyatt Earp. I played Wyvern back in the day, his dragon-based CCG. So I am a big fan of Mike Fitzgerald, and I really enjoy that he decided to kind of branch out from his typical designer comfort zone to design this. There are a lot of things I really do like about this game. This, in some ways, reminds me of Takenoko, but I like Takenoko more. This reminds me in certain ways, and this is kind of the weird one, of Five Tribes. And I think when I say that, I mean in sort of the tactical planning and having to kind of react to the different board state and trying to puzzle out what you need to do. But again, I think I like a game like Five Tribes more than I like Dragon Island. So it does certain things, and again, I don't mean those in derivative ways. I just mean that it's reminiscent of those to me, but it's certainly different enough from both of those. But I still feel like I like those games a little bit more. But to be fair, those are some pretty spectacular games. So yeah, I think I have some similar concerns, at least with the art. I don't know that I necessarily have thematic concerns or production concerns, but certainly in terms of the graphic design, I've got some issues. And yeah, but overall, I think I like the game certainly more than you do. But yeah, all right. Well, let's talk about the rule book. So there's not a lot to the rules here, and let me tell you this. My big thing with the rule book is when I was done reading it, and this was after having played the prototype too, about a year and change ago. A significant amount had changed, and I didn't really remember a whole lot. But I do remember finishing the rule book and going, okay, what? Like everything was fairly clear as far as the steps and how you play, but the feel of the game, for whatever that means, wasn't conveyed in the rulebook to me, at least. And I felt like when I was explaining the rules of the game, I would often have to explain why I thought that was important. Like, for example, when you talk about spending gold to move a dragon to any other space, why would you want to do that? Like, it just seemed to lack the context. And I don't necessarily know what the fix was for that, but why I would take certain actions was very much not apparent in the rulebook. It kind of reminded me of like a Phil Eklund rulebook. And like, okay, I just read PAX Renaissance. I now know what actions I should take, but I have no idea what the value of those actions are. And I think that was kind of the feel for it. But once I started playing, okay, yeah, it's all starting to kind of get pieced together. So yeah. All right. Well, Alex, let's talk about the art and components. Let's start with art. Not graphic design, but art. Do you have any issues with the art? Oh.
So here's what I'll say. As far as a box goes, the box cover of this game is gorgeous.
Looks really
I actually think it looks really good, and it looks great on a shelf, and I thought they did a fantastic job with that. The tile art was fine. I think the character art on the player shields, it didn't draw me in. In fact, if anything, it just kind of bugged me. I wasn't a fan of a lot of that. There's the red wizard, the blue wizard, specifically. Yeah, it's just it wasn't anything that I enjoyed, and if anything, was a slight like to it. It wasn't not in like a I'm grossed out by it, but just in a I'm not a fan of this art kind of way.
I like the art.
Graphic design. Hey, Sean. Want to get into that one?
Yeah, let's talk about the graphic design. So the tiles have these nice depictions of the type of terrain. So mountains, there's this nice illustration of a mountain, the forest, etc. They look good. And then you have, a 1/2 inch to a 3/4 inch border around each tile that is just this plain Crayola flat primary color. Red, green, blue, white. And it's definitely helpful for quick recognition because you need like certain patterns in certain ways, right? For the different treasure cards. Or you need to know, okay, if I place this tile here, I'm going to get these various active energies, etc. So the playability there is certainly strong, but it was kind of jarring to me. Like it was very jarring to just have this flat primary color that was pretty thick. I mean, if it were thinner, like if it were like 1/8 of an inch or less, it might have been less jarring. If there was some texture to it, it might have been better. I don't know, but it was really off-putting, and I think really affected the table presence for me. What do you think?
I agree. And I will say this, there were some folks playing at the table next to ours when I was getting my final plays of this in last night at Jamie Stegmeyer's, and a couple people were asking if it was a prototype.
Oh boy.
That's not a good thing if that's the question coming up. And the main reason for that was those borders, those bright borders. I think there was a smarter solution to it, maybe some sort of shading or other form or fashion. I get the practical reasons for why they did that. You want folks to have a good sense or good indication of what a tile does. You get that, though, and it hurts immersion. For sure, it hurts immersion as far as the game goes, which is part of the thematic concern I'm talking about with the game. Is you don't feel as immersed in what could be a really cool and interesting and fun world. The other one I'll bring up, Sean, are the player shields.
Yeah.
And so a couple of issues. One on a practical playability perspective, mine tipped over a lot. Mine I would keep knocking those things over. You didn't have that issue, Sean?
No, I really didn't.
Okay, well that's
Gravity
just me.
Must be different in St. Louis.
It must be, or you're just playing with me, who has very poor fine motor control.
You're like, let me move this dragon, and then you knock over everyone's player shield.
Yeah, well, and I definitely did that. So there are little touches a game company can do to make something a little more immersive, and one of those things is font. And as best as I can tell, I don't know if it's Times New Roman, but the font on the back of this is somewhere in that family, somewhere pretty close to that.
So basically, it's the player aid on the back of the player screen.
Yes, it's the player aid on the back of the player screen, which, to its credit, does a great job laying out how you score points. It's actually a really good reference for that. It's a pretty good reference to what you should do on your turn, and it also has some of the costs of different things spelled out in a way that, when you understand the game, makes a good amount of sense. I thought they did a good job on that front. But then you have something like, and I know it sounds like nitpicking, but to me, it's another immersion-breaking thing. It's not in some sort of a fantasy theme or the font that they used on the box or something close to that pulls you into the game. Sean, I don't know. Did you have similar issues or what came up for you as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, it definitely felt underproduced. Like it was a good thickness and it was functional, but it felt like it was missing a little pop, a little jazz, so to speak. So
and the treasure cards, I had a similar kind of feel to them, not as jarring, but had a similar feel. There's some nice components in this. I think the dragons look quite nice on the board, and those are cool little wooden dragon meeples. I thought they did fine, and I think the card layouts for the dragons themselves and the art on those cards tends to be pretty good too. But then you get things like the triangle to distinguish what the wild tiles are supposed to be. And again, I don't know what the best solution is to that, but that one didn't seem like it.
Yeah, those were weird. So there are these little 3/4 inch equilateral triangles, and they're just that primary color. That's it. They're just solid, flat primary color. There's not like it was weird. It just felt like they were like things that you'd punch out and then have to discard for whatever reason. Yeah, it was weird. So anything else about art, components, graphic design?
No, the card thickness, as you mentioned, was pretty good. Some of the other issues with components I think can come up in the context of gameplay relating to fiddliness or lack of fiddliness, but we'll talk it out when we get into the big section, gameplay. Gameplay innovation. Sean, you seem to like this one better than I do, and why is that? What is it about this game that draws you in?
So I really like these medium weight games where there is a heavy tactical element to it, where you're trying to figure out, where it's a puzzle almost, right? You're trying to figure out this ideal placement of various components. And so you have a couple choices on your turn, right? So the very first choice is, where am I placing this tile? And that choice of tile placement can be affected by, well, I need a certain amount of active energy of these colors, or I need to start setting up for this particular treasure tile, or I need to make sure that I put a blue dragon on the board because I have need of a blue dragon for a particular reason. And so you've got 2 tiles to choose from with 2 different faces. I like that choice, right? To me, that's a good number of decisions. If it were like Carcassonne and there's only the 1 tile, even with 2 faces, that's a little bit more annoying. But I like the fact that you've got some choice here, right? I enjoy that. That certainly creates player agency, so to speak. And then you have the choice of, okay, now that I've done that, what action am I trying to do? Which tile am I trying to wind up on? And am I trying to end up on this particular tile because I want to use that particular action space, or because there's a dragon already there, or because I need to end up there again for that treasure card, because you need to actually end on the tile that you're going to be revealing a treasure card for. And then, do I need to move dragons there? Do I have the gold to move dragons there? Hey, I want to move dragons there to be efficient, but I don't have the gold. So before I can even take this turn that I want, I have to do these 1 or 2 turns of setup. So there's a little bit of long-term strategic planning. Cool. I like all of those things. I like that puzzle. I like the ability to have pet dragons, which give you little incremental advantages like we didn't really discuss in the rules. But if you're capturing a dragon, or if you're building a building and it's on your color tile, you get a discount of 1 active energy. Or if you have the red dragon, it's an additional discount of 1 active energy to capture, or the white dragon, a discount of 1 to build a building. So trying to set up these really efficient turns is something that I love to do in games, and I feel like I'm able to do that in Dragon Island. And I think that's why I wind up enjoying this game more than you would, for example, where you see these choices that are paralyzing in terms of that analysis paralysis. To me, it's a good number of choices. And certainly there are turns where I can get in the weeds and be like, oh man, what am I going to do here? But for the most part, I felt like it was a good mix of restriction and choices.
So I agree with you in this sense. I agree with you in that you can feel really clever playing this game.
Yes.
You can have a turn where... you can have a turn where you're simultaneously luring a bunch of dragons onto a tile. After you place the tile that got you a bunch of different resources and money, use some of that money to lure a bunch of dragons onto a space, flew to that space yourself, captured all those dragons, did the action of that space to build a building, and then found a treasure on the space you were at. That's a turn you can have, and that would be a massive turn. It's not easy to pull off, but it's pull-offable, and that's cool. That's a cool puzzly thing in this game. You can feel like a pretty awesome player in those moments. The problem is your typical turn may not be that, and there are a lot of moments, hinge moments, where you're going to sit and think, and some of these things are automatic, but I'm going to read through the turn structure on the player aid. Again, nice that it's laid out there. 1, place a tile and produce. Okay, you have to decide where you're going to place and what resources you're going to have. 2, put any dragons out. That's not really a decision. That's just something, if any spaces are empty, you do that. 3, move dragons. So if you want to, you can pay some money to move some dragons to different spots on the board, either to clear a tile so you can access a space there, or to move them all into one space so you can capture them or tame them. Move your wizard, so fly your dude around the board and hopefully to a space where you can do something either with dragons or treasure or the action. Then 5, deal with the dragons. 6, do the action of your tile. 7, play a treasure map card if you've done that. 8, draw a tile. Some of those things are pretty automatic. Some of those things, you got a decision to make. And especially that combination of placing a tile and those treasure map cards, I found I had a lot of moments where I was just agonizing over those decisions. And when I'm in that space, Sean, I'm not having a ton of fun with the game.
Yeah, and I definitely get that. I could totally see that, and I think that's what kind of sets it apart from being more of a Sean game than say an Alex game. You mentioned before multiple paths to victory. I mean, it's really cool because you could decide to go really heavy on a treasure map strategy if you want. So you want to pick up the blue dragon as a pet, which when anytime you pick up a treasure map, usually it's draw 2, pick 1. Now with a blue dragon, it's draw 3, pick 2. So if you want to be all in on that strategy, you could totally do that. Or if you just want to kind of incidentally fulfill some treasure map objectives because they give you a couple points here and they give you some gold, which you're going to use for other stuff, you can totally do that. If you want to just go with this crazy capture strategy where you build a pen and then throughout the game, you're just spending gold to move a bunch of dragons to your pen. And then in the last turn of the game, you just go over there and just grab this huge pile of dragons for 10, 9, or 8 energy, depending on what discounts you have, you can do that. Or if you want to go out and just be a crazy builder and build all the energy spires because they're worth 3 points apiece, and you're helping out everyone else a little bit by doing that, that's why it gives you so many points, you can totally do that too. And then if you want to tame these dragons, and certainly I think no matter what you're doing, you want to tame a couple. But if you want to tame all the different dragons and you're able to protect the dragons with those layers or whatever, that's potentially worth 15 points if you have all 5 types of dragons and all of your coins are out there. And that's by itself a good half the points of a winning score, give or take, right? So I like that. I like that there are different ways to play this. And throughout my 5 plays, at all player counts, I play 2, 3, and 4, I've been able to kind of try out the different paths to victory. I've tried a balance approach. I've tried focusing on one thing over another. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that's another good part of this is that there are definitely legitimate multiple paths to victory, as you mentioned. And yeah, there's not just one way to win. And yeah, I think you can win in several ways. And I think that's an admirable thing to have in just about any game. And I think it's well done here. Yeah, so I'd agree with you there. Sean, in terms of player counts, what player counts would you recommend this one at?
I would recommend this at 3. I think 3 is ideal. I very strongly dislike this game at 4. It felt too long. It felt too chaotic. I could basically kind of tune out until the turn before me or my turn. I will not play this game at 4. I liked it a lot at 3. I liked it well enough at 2. I think 3 is really the sweet spot here. I found the problem with 2 is the treasures were almost undervalued because you don't have enough other people kind of helping you out by putting the tiles that you need where you need them. Now, certainly people can kind of put a tile somewhere and then now they've completely messed up your treasure map. But I felt like it was a little bit easier at higher player counts to achieve those treasure maps. But yeah, 3 is the sweet spot for me.
So I would agree with you on 4. Not that I played it there, but that I just don't think there's any way I would play this at 4. 2 and 3 each have their pros and cons. With 3, the treasure cards become a little more interesting. There's a bigger map for you to explore and more possibilities. Things like the telekinesis power becomes a little bit more beneficial because you could have a giant line of tiles that it just zaps across. You can certainly lure a ton of dragons. So that's the benefits of 3. The sacrifice you're making is there's definitely more downtime in a 3-player game. With a 2-player game, it moves along a little faster. You get back to your turn, but it's a little less interesting board-wise. I think still very playable, but not as interesting. So there's pros and cons to both 2 and 3, and I think I didn't play it at 4, to be perfectly honest, and I think I'd have a very hard time playing this one at 4, Sean, and I would echo your thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I think that's certainly fair. So yeah, thematic. You said you had some thematic concerns about the game.
So let me talk about this in the context of another game. With Tiny Epic Quest, one of the things that I thought was a bit of a drawback thematically were these positional quests that if your folks were in a certain position on the board, that somehow that unlocked something, and you would get a reward as a result of that. There were a lot of thematic elements to Tiny Epic Quest. That one I felt was a bit of a disconnect. That sort of odd puzzle that didn't quite work in the context of things. The treasure map cards had, although they're fun, felt in a certain way. The fact that it's a cool mechanic that you can capture as many dragons as you want on one tile, as long as you have the active energy to do it. Thematically, it's hard to wrap your head around what that means. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. It's just not one that's obvious to me in playing this one, Sean. Was that something that came up for you or a thought?
No, I don't think so. Okay, let's say you're a Ghostbuster, right?
Okay.
And you're out busting ghosts, as a Ghostbuster
makes me
does
feel
from
good.
time to time.
Yeah, makes me feel good.
So let's say you send out that Yeah, you send out your little box, right? You've got your proton packs, and then you lead the ghost down, and your little containment box opens up. It sucks in all the ghosts, right? It's not limited to like just one ghost at a time.
Sure.
I feel like as a wizard, as a dragon busting wizard, that's what you're doing. You've got some magic spell, and you're capturing them all with this dragon busting containment box.
Okay, so these are ghost dragons now.
No, they're not. No, they're dragons. It's an analogy, Alex. No analogies are perfect, but it's what it is.
Any case, yeah, it didn't work for me thematically. The puzzle pieces of this had a merit to it. But the game itself, it just didn't click with me as I'm this awesome wizard capturing and riding around on my pet dragons. There were slight moments of that, but it just wasn't anything I felt connected to, which is a shame because I think there was the potential there for sure.
Okay, so do you remember in Return of the King, the third Lord of the Rings movie, when that's the Battle of Pelennor Fields? You know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Battle of Pelennor Fields outside of Osgiliath? No, not Osgiliath. Outside of Minas Tirith. There we go. And the Hara Dream with their Mumakil are attacking, and then Legolas does this whole little thing where he's, killing the Mumakil, and then the Mumakil slides into the dirt, and then Legolas slides down the trunk. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Don't just nod. People can't hear you nodding. So,
yeah.
So that's whenever I was telling someone about the movement, right? So if you have a red dragon, you can immediately, as part of your wizard movement, move to the other side of the board to a red tile, and then you could just slide off onto an adjacent tile. So I always described it as that. You're like sliding down the dragon's neck, just like Legolas, off into the next tile. I'm just creating all these thematic connections here, Alex. I'm just more imaginative and creative than you. That's all I'm saying.
Very possible.
That's all I'm saying. Very possible.
You're a very imaginative person, Sean. Very imaginative.
It's true. It's true. How else
I just
can I
didn't
have
feel
all these illusions of grandeur?
And sometimes I just don't feel it. And I didn't feel it with this. So the guild had something to say about this one. BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, I'm a big fan of Mike Fitzgerald and have a signed copy of Dragon Island from Gen Con 50. I watched his demo and was intrigued by the tile-laying, engine-building aspects of the game. Plus, dragons! Unfortunately, this one has not hit the mark so far. Played it 3 times, which might not be enough. And as my group said, it was too complicated for its own good. 8 steps on each turn, complicated source generation rules, lots of fiddly little pieces, and those crayon-colored tile borders. I had a good experience playing with my son as a 2-player, but this is one I'd likely score a 2 or 3. Boy, I hate unleashing the 2 on this game, and I have high hopes that with a few more plays and the right play group, it might move up for the Dukes Double-Take. That's BJ's take, and he brought up a thought that I think we forgot to mention. Sean, I find this game a little bit too fiddly in terms of all of the different things you're grabbing on a given turn. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a pretty fiddly game.
So, yeah, those are BJ's thoughts. Sean, you go first with this one.
Okay. All right. So here at the Dukes of Dice, we use a 6-point scale. A 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. A 6 is an all-time favorite that is a contender for the top 10. So I'm going to fall somewhere either on the 3 or the 4 range. So let's talk this out. A 3, game is okay, not exciting, we'll play in the right situation. A 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. And I will say that I don't think it's fair to say that this game is not exciting, because it certainly scratches a lot of those itches where I want to feel clever in gameplay, where, when I'm able to figure out a turn and I have just the right amount of energy, I have just the right amount of gold to do what I need to do, oh, that's fantastic. Or when, last night, my final play of this game, there was one spot that I needed to place my tile that would give me the right amount of gold, the right amount of energy to do exactly what I needed to do. And of course, that was the spot that the player before me decided to place their tile. Wah, wah. So yeah, there's a lot that I like about this game. I think that it's held back by that graphic design. I think that having to go through those 8 or 9 steps is a little tedious at first, right? So you just need to make sure that you don't grab your gold from fulfilling an objective, a map objective, before you need to pay for taming a dragon. I mean, once you understand the turn sequence, you don't have to go so rigidly down, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. You don't need to do that. But yeah, there is a certain fiddliness there that I'm not going to say it holds it back. I think I could see how you might think that, and with your experience, but there is some fiddliness there. But I think I'm more forgiving of fiddliness than you are. So I'm going to give this a 4. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the Duchy. I am telling you right now that graphic design, though, is going to turn a lot of players off. I really believe that. And I think that if you like the aspect of Takenoko in that you are trying to set up certain patterns of the tiles, in that you're trying to move these shared pieces on the board around to create a certain beneficial situation for you, then you're going to like this game. If you like the aspect of, say, a 5 Tribes, where it's a very tactical midweight board game where you're trying to puzzle things out, then I think you're going to like this game. So I'll tell you right now, Takenoko is a 5. 5 Tribes is a 6. This game isn't there for me. Is there a possibility with an expansion? If there were some more buildings that you could buy, if there was an extra type of terrain, I don't know. I don't even know if that's even in Mike's thoughts right now. I'm going to give this a 4. Good game, worth playing, just all the time, belongs in the Duchy. I'm very curious to what extent this is going to be on my radar a year from now. So yeah, that's where I wind up. A tentative 4. We'll put it that way. Alex?
All right, so let's talk about the scale here. So the scale ranks 1 to 6, as Sean mentioned. And one of the things I love about the scale is there's a very clear, broad definition beyond the specific definition for what each one means. 1 would be burn the game. 2 would be I can see what's going on here. It has some merit, but I wouldn't play it again. 3 is I'd play it again, but I don't care if anyone owns it. 4 is yeah, I'd like someone to own it. 5 is I'd probably suggest it. It's really good. 6 is oh man, you have to play this game. Those are the broad strokes of how I see our scale. So, Sean has been watching me on webcam during this recording, and there are times I can be pretty fidgety anyway, and I have been like hands on face, like looking at player aids. I feel a little queasy right now, Sean. I can't see any way around it, just based on my enjoyment of the game, based on the graphic design issues, based on just the feeling I got from this. It's a 2. I see the merit to it. I see some of the cool design decisions. I like the multiple paths to victory. I like a lot of what's going on here. But at the end of the day, I just don't have fun with this in any form or fashion. I don't like the look of it once it's on the table. I think R&R did this game absolutely no favors. It's fiddly, and it's more of a Sean game than an Alex game, and I think Mike probably knew that going in, and it's just not one I want to play again. It just isn't, Sean. I can't see myself keeping this in the collection, suggesting it, wanting to play it if it's suggested at a game night, and I feel really bad about that because I really like Mike a lot. So if anyone in the future thinks that we're biased based on relationships with folks in the industry, there may be no game designer closer to this podcast than Mike Fitzgerald. And for me to give that game a 2 is ripping me in half. And I just don't see any way I can have integrity as a reviewer on this show and not do it. But I think if you like Sean's taste in games, which most of you do per our surveys, you should give this one a chance and give this one a look. And if you're in the Alex 15%, it's a 2. So, yeah.
So, Alex, I got a message from Mike here. He says your penance is to go play and lose 5 games of baseball highlights.
He didn't say any of that.
No, he didn't. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Duke's review of Dragon Island from R&R Games and Mike Fitzgerald. A very distraught-looking Alex gives it a 2, and Sean gives it a tentative 4.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double-Take.
Hey, this week in the Dukes Quadruple Take, we're looking at a couple of awesome games.
Pull it together, Alex. Come on.
I'm sorry.
We got a show to finish.
Oh, I'm a wreck. I'm a total wreck right now. Oh.
Power through. Let's go, Goldsmith. Get the lead out.
First up, episode 114, Spell of the Ball, where we looked at Arcane Academy from Eric Lang and Kevin J. Wilson, an IDW game. I like this one a lot, Sean. I gave this one solid 5. And I keep forgetting to mention Kevin Wilson, so sorry, Kevin Wilson. You did an awesome job with this one. I think there's other games of yours that I really enjoy too. So sorry I keep forgetting you, and I keep just mentioning Eric Lang. But I like that it's fairly easy to teach. I think the combo element of this is nice. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It feels really fun. And this is one that flew way too far under the radar for me. I think more folks need to try this one out. And I'm still at a 5 on this one, Sean, even now. What did you think of this one back in the day?
So I gave it a 4. In fact, I think I called it a high 4, but I said what was holding it back from a 5 is just the fact that I wouldn't really necessarily think to bring this out. But certainly if, someone had mentioned, I'd be like, oh yeah, let's play that. And I think that's still true. Like, I think it's a solid game and a lot of cool combo effects. But I think I'm going to drop it to a 3. So game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. It's not something I've thought about in the last year. And but I still think it's a decent game. It's a solid game, and we talked about a Sean game versus an Alex game. I think this is probably more a Sean than Alex game. But yeah, I'm gonna drop it down to a 3 and call it a day.
Okay. Guild had some thoughts on this one. No, they didn't. Never mind.
Except they didn't.
Let's move on. To episode 115, City Slickers. This is where we talked about Tiny Epic Western, Scott Alm's design from Gamelin Games. And I was higher on this one than you were as well, Sean. I gave this one a 4. I thought the caveat on this one, the big one, was luck and teachability, but I thought there were some really cool moments in this one. Really enjoyed it. Sean, you gave this one a 3. You said it was staying in your collection, but you never knew when you would play it. Is this still in your collection, and are you still having those same thoughts?
It is no longer in my collection.
Oh.
I sold it at a Gamer's Garage sale, and I am never looking back. I'm going to drop this one as well to a 2. A 2 is game has some merit, but it has some significant issues. I'm kind of shocked looking back on my experience that I gave it a 3. Both of us backed it on Kickstarter. There were things I liked about this game. I like that this is the Tiny Epic worker placement game, but man, I was not good at it. I don't know that I particularly enjoyed it. So certainly the game has some merit, but I just don't want to play it again, and I got rid of it. So yeah, I'm gonna drop it to a 2.
Fair enough. I have not changed my thoughts on this one, Sean. I enjoyed the poker element to this. I enjoyed how you would fight for control over different spaces, how the 2 cards on one side would compare with the 1 card in your hand. I thought it had some nice innovative elements. It had some great production touches in there. And I see no reason to move it anywhere else. I have played it once since, and still in my collection. It's not going anywhere. It's still a 4. It's has some really cool design elements to it, but it's proven to be a pretty divisive game, as you'll hear in the guild thoughts on this one. I'll start with Jesse Metcalf because he's more in line with me. He says, I really like Tiny Epic Western, probably because I like worker placement, poker, and the American West as a theme. There's a lot going on in this small box game, which there should be for a game that has epic in the title. It reminds me of Harbor with the buildings and some of the mechanics. Like Harbor, it seems to end a little too soon. I always feel like I want a few more turns to play the game. Also, with the porch slots always changing, it seems like it's missing or needs an engine building element with the buildings, like Le Havre. Still, I enjoy this game. Other worker placement games overshadow this title, but this game has portability and a shorter game length. Overall, a 4 on the 6-point Ducal scale.
So Sylvain Lacroix says, I actually backed this and found the concept really interesting. I love poker, and the mix with a worker placement game was a good idea. Technically. To be fair, I'm generally a positive gamer. Rarely there's a game that I really dislike. I'm a French-Canadian YouTube reviewer, and I'm usually very kind to all games. I also use a 6-point system to rate my games, and Tiny Epic Western fell to a 2. The game is too fiddly, rules are not intuitive, and I teach games all the time, and the gameplay ultimately is uninspired. It's sad because that game had a lot of interesting elements. Well, I have to #unleash the 2. Unleash the 2. Yes, it's that bad. Sorry, Scott Alms. This is the worst Tiny Epic game. I agree completely. Well, I haven't played Defenders. I've heard bad things about Defenders, but yeah, no, I'm not a fan of Tiny Epic Western, Alex, and Sylvain and I are in pretty lockstep there.
Fair enough. So, yeah, I think this is another one where if you're more of a Sean type, you might want to steer clear of this one. If you like my kind of style, you might want to steer towards this one, though I will say it's not typical for the kind of game that I would typically like.
I was going to say, I don't know if this is necessarily fitting within the typical Sean-Alex dichotomy.
I'd actually agree with that. It probably isn't, but there was something that charmed me about this game, and the mechanics were nice enough, and I enjoyed it, and I still do, and I will defend my 4. So that's our Dukes quadruple take. For Tiny Epic Western, it goes from a 3 to a 2 for Sean, and stays right there at a 4 for me.
Downfall from Tasty Minstrel Games is currently blowing up on Kickstarter. This is the deluxeified version of Downfall, and if this is a game that interests you, you'll want to go ahead and back this because these deluxeified versions are amazing, and they're not typically available at retail after the Kickstarter campaign. Downfall is designed by John D. Clare, who's the designer of Mystic Vale, and now he's bringing us a 4X game through our friends over at Tasty Minstrel Games. In this 4X strategy game, each player will take control of a unique faction in the year 2213. It's a bleak and unforgiving future where survival is never certain. Using a unique card drafting mechanism, players will have several options on their turn. Will they forage for resources, abate radiation, or travel and explore the desolated wasteland with their citizens and airships? As the game proceeds, will they spend time researching new technologies or triggering conflicts with their opponents? All the while, you're having to deal with a myriad of harsh events and a nuclear winter. Downfall will be on Kickstarter until November 10th, 2017. Be sure to check it out. And for all of Tasty Minstrel's other great games, check out playtmg.com.
Well, this week we have a discussion topic that came straight from Sean's brain, and the Guild did not seem to care one bit for, because we didn't have any help from the Guild. But I think it's actually an interesting one. And we're talking about designers branching out and doing a game that's atypical. And this idea came about because Dragon Island is pretty atypical for Mike Fitzgerald. Mike's best known for card games like Baseball Highlights, Diamonds, and of course the Mystery Rummy series, among others. And to have a tile placement game along these lines, the resource management, et cetera, seemed like a pretty big branch out. So we were thinking about other game designers who went out on a limb and went in a different direction than we're typically used to seeing. Sean, you absolutely prepared for this in typical fashion. I absolutely did not.
Sure did.
So why don't you start us off, and I'll chime in where necessary.
Okay, so before we jump in, let's talk a little bit about what's the point? What's the point to this conversation? Because certainly we have designers that kind of get in a groove, right? They design a game and then they kind of expand on those concepts for the next game and tweak something. You think of like Uwe Rosenberg, right? He has all of these big medium heavy games like Le Havre and Agricola and Caverna and Fields of Arla. And they all do very similar things. There's a certain signature on those games where you're like, oh, that feels like an Uwe game, right? And so it's always interesting when they kind of step away from that and try something different. So even with Uwe, though, I don't necessarily put him on my list because when he's stepped away, it hasn't necessarily... Well, okay. So like, for example, Bonanza and the different Bonanza variants and whatnot. Those were all early in his design career. So if anything, the heavier games are kind of a step away, sort of. And then you've got games like Patchwork and the new Indian Summer and Cottage Garden. But then those have elements similar to A Feast for Odin. So he's still kind of in his wheelhouse. He just has multiple wheelhouses. But the very first game that I thought about, which you also thought about, Alex, or first designer, I should say, was Stefan Feld. Stefan Feld, the master of the point salad. You got Castle Burgundy, you got Bora Bora, you got Trajan, all these amazing games that I love. That are these kind of dry Euros where you sneeze and you get a point, right? Whatever you're doing, you're getting the point for something, right?
Yep.
That's why we call them point salads. You got a little point from this, a little point from that. And one of his more recent titles, Oracle of Delphi, was not a point salad. In fact, it was a race game. You were racing around the Grecian archipelagos. Is that right? No. What's the right geographical term.
Oh, I'm not gonna get this one.
I'll look that up. Anyway, you're racing around. You're trying to complete these different tasks. There's some pick up and deliver. There's fighting these monsters. There's some dice rolling. This was not a typical Feld game, but it still in certain ways kind of felt like a Feld game because you had shared elements with like Castles of Burgundy and that you would roll dice and based on what you rolled, determine what you could do. And there are ways to change those dice from one symbol to another with some certain mitigating factors and things like that. But definitely a step away from what he typically designs. And so I guess the question becomes, for you, did it work or did it just kind of fall flat because it's just not what you're used to? I don't know. What do you think? You weren't a big fan of Oracle of Delphi.
I wasn't a big fan in it. And to be clear, I'm not a fan that's not true. I was about to say I'm not a fan of a game based on it going a different way from a typical design thing. But I then immediately thought of a game that probably should have been on this list, and that was from Red Raven Games, the one on a boat, Islebound. I punished Islebound because it didn't have the storytelling of Above and Below.
Huh.
And so that felt like enough of a branch out for me that I dinged the game as a result, even though the game itself stood on its own.
So you realize that Ryan Lockett has like 8 games.
I know.
And only 2 of them are storytelling games.
I know.
Okay. Just checking.
I'm not feeling very well, Sean.
Okay, sorry. I'll carry the rest of the conversation for us.
Please
Alex.
do. No, okay. with Oracle Delphi, I just didn't like it. I don't know if I have any deeper thoughts than that. I didn't like it, and I don't know if it's because he branched out or because I just didn't like it. But yeah, I didn't like it.
So far, we're 0 for 2 with Alex, Stefan Feld, and Mike Fitzgerald. So maybe, Alex, you're telling designers, don't be innovative, don't branch out.
I'm not saying that because one of my favorite designers ever is Antoine Bauza, who can do a wide array of things and do them really well.
So it's interesting. So what I did to prepare for this is I went to a geek list of all the popular designers. There's actually several geek lists, and they update them every year. And I looked at Bauza, and for the most part, yeah, he's got a wide range of games, but they're all kind of similar weight. They've got a Bauza feel to them. So I didn't put him on my list. So, okay. So this one's kind of breaking the mold here. Vlada Chvátil, which is not the correct way to say his name, but we had like a 15 response thread in our guild about how to correctly pronounce Vlada Chvátil. And I think my ultimate understanding was Vlada Chvátil stopped wanting to tell people how to pronounce his name. So he's just like, yeah, it's fine. Vlada Chvátil. So anyway, every one of his games is completely different than all of his other games. Like, it's crazy. So you've got Code Names, and you've got Galaxy Trucker, and you've got Mage Knight, and you've got, what's that one? Bunny Moose?
Yeah.
You've got Tosh Kalar, Through the Freaking Ages. I mean, like, all of his games are, like, super different. Like, I feel like of any designer out there, he is probably the one that is most divergent from game to game. And if you have someone else in mind out there, Guild and listeners, I'm curious to hear, because I feel like Vlada is probably the best at that, which is pretty incredible. And they're all pretty good games. Boy, Alex, I played so much Through the Ages on my iPad in the last month or so. Like, a ton of Through the Ages.
Should I try that one, Sean, or am I going to be disappointed?
No, don't play Through the Ages.
Okay.
Oh, man, you'd hate it so much. Oh, it's so good. So anyway.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thoughts on Vlada, Alex?
No, I think you're right. He's definitely one of the more diverse designers out there, along with Bauza. I think both of them have games that are pretty different game to game, for sure.
Okay. So the next one I thought about was Martin Wallace. And I'm thinking about this more in terms of weight. Now, to be fair, Martin Wallace has designed almost, more than one game every year since 1998, right? Some years there have been multiples. So he's designed like 30-some games, at least what I can tell on BGG. That's a lot. I haven't played most of them. I've played Brass. I've played Age of Steam. Is that one of his?
Yes, it is.
We've both played. Brass. Well, yeah. I said Brass.
Sorry.
Sunny Emerald. We both played first edition. He played second edition. A few Acres of Snow. So he likes to use deck building a lot in a lot of his games. He also kind of a heavier weight game. So I thought about Via Nebula, which felt like a Martin Wallace game because there's this shared route building element as you're building these routes through the clouds, through the fog, rather. But it was a much lighter game than you typically expect from a Martin Wallace.
Yeah, here's where I agree with you. I agree with you that the weight is different, but the mechanics definitely felt like a Wallace game for sure.
That's exactly what my point was.
I know, but I don't know if I'd classify that I don't know if weight alone is enough to call it a divergent.
But it was just based on what I thought was typical of his games.
Okay. I have one, Sean. I did a little research on the fly.
Oh, good. While I was talking.
Because something came
to my
well.
point.
When else am I going to research this, Sean?
I know. Go ahead, Alex. And I helped.
Absolutely. So this is an Alexander Pfister game. Sort of. It's an Alexander Pfister expansion. Do you know what I'm thinking about, Sean?
Oh, the Oh My Goods expansion.
Right.
Yeah.
So Alexander Pfister, I don't know if there's a singular thread you could tie through all of those games, but they don't also feel necessarily supremely different in some cases. I guess
Sure.
Isle of Skye with the placement and putting workers out feels a little different from, say, Great Western Trail. What I would say though is that theme, while it can be a part of those games, isn't necessarily the chief part of it, and certainly storytelling isn't. And I think one of the things that shocked me when I played Oh My Goods, Longsdale, and Revolt is it's a story element added onto a game that, as a base game, has almost no story. Is pure mechanics, and for that specific game to get an expansion that turned it into a campaign story-driven type of game, I thought was really interesting and divergent in a big way from what we would typically expect from Alexander Pfister. What do you think about that one?
So I still haven't played the expansion.
Oh man, what is going on, Sean?
Well, priorities. What can I say? Yeah, no, I still haven't played the expansion. Hopefully I'll pick it up soon.
You absolutely should. It's really good. Anyway, that's my contribution to this conversation. I did work, Sean. Yay!
Hooray! All right, I got a couple more here. So Eric Lang and Kevin Wilson, which, hey, wait a second. We just talked about this game, Arcane Academy.
Oh.
Right? So Eric Lang is known for games like Blood Rage and Chaos in the Old World, a bunch of card games like Fantasy Flight LCGs,
Godfather.
Dice Masters, Godfather, right. And Kevin Wilson is also at one point he was I think an in-house Fantasy Flight designer as well. And so Arcane Academy is very much a different game than you would expect of either one of them, I think. There's no miniatures, so that's kind of weird. But I find it interesting. And we already talked about Arcane Academy, but as far as two solid hot designers, I think that it's an interesting divergence for what they typically would do. So the next one that I came up with, which I was shocked to find this out. I had no idea. So one of my favorite systems of games is the Commands and Colors system designed by Richard Borg. So you've got Memoir 44, you've got Commands and Colors Agents, you've got Battle Lore, the first edition, second edition, etc. I had no idea that Richard Borg designed Liar's Dice back in 1987. No idea. I love Liar's Dice. I had no idea that was a Richard Borg game.
I didn't either. I'm actually looking that up because I don't believe you.
It's true. It's true. It's a Richard Borg game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That completely catches me off guard.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It sure is.
It's a great game. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah. No, it really is. All right, Alex. I'm going to wrap this up with one. Well, one more. You got anything else before I wrap it up?
Absolutely not.
Okay, perfect. All right. You know what just came out, Alex? A lot of things. The answer is a lot of things. What I'm thinking of specifically is Pandemic Legacy Season 2, designed by Rob Davio and Matt Leacock. So Matt Leacock is, of course, the designer of Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy and Pandemic Iberia and, hey, a bunch of Pandemic games. So when I heard that there was a word party game coming out from Matt Leacock that involved spools of yarn and clothespins called Nitwit, I was very intrigued. I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool. Ultimately, Nitwit is a categories type game where you're kind of building this board based on these cards that you draw with certain words on it, certain categories that you then clothespin in certain ways, that you then take your strings and loop them in certain ways. And then, so you have to basically, you have to come up with words that have similar, I don't know. it's not great. I'm not a fan of Nitwit. I got rid of my copy of Nitwit. I'd rather just play Categories. It looks cool. The components are cool, but it's also an out there design from the designer of Pandemic. Did you play Nitwit? I don't think you played Nitwit, did you?
I've never played Nitwit, and I haven't heard much buzz about it. It just sort of kind of appeared, and I was excited about it, and I never actually played it, and didn't hear a lot of people suggesting it either. So I don't know what happened with that one, but oh well.
Yeah.
But it's definitely very different from his other design, for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's so tied to Pandemic. I think that's a good pick for you, Sean. No doubt.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate your validation.
Oh.
Good talk. Good talk.
I need to lie down.
All right. Well, I think that does it. If you have any other suggestions, Alex is going to put up a thread in the guild for other ideas.
Am I? Is that a thing I'm going to do?
I just volunteered you because you forgot to do it for this last Dukes
All
on
right.
Deck. So,
well, okay.
So yeah, let us know in the guild what you think. What are some other games that are outside a designer's wheelhouse? By the way, when I say wheelhouse, that means, like we've been talking about, a game that is not typical of what they would design. We got a good lesson from our friend Jonas Jepsen, right? Jonas
Resting Jepsen, yep.
So it was interesting. He had a comment on the guild. He said, hey, he's Danish. And so English is not his first language. And he said, hey, I keep hearing that you guys use this term. Is it pronounced table hawk, like Hawk? And of course, we were talking about table hog, as in something that takes up a lot of space and it's hogging up the table. And it's just kind of, an idiom, an idiomatic usage that we kind of take for granted as native English speakers. And I just thought that was an interesting little reminder that we have a pretty significant foreign language audience as well. So when we use words like wheelhouse or table hog, we just got to be a little clear, Alex.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Okay. No, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a good lesson. So I appreciate Jonas for bringing that to our attention. And that was kind of cool. Well, Alex, let's wrap up this episode. But before we do, we need to go into the rest of the episode title top 6. First off, Kyle Kelly suggested Get Along, Little Dragon.
You pronounced it correctly. Yeah, it's spelled get, but it should be, it's Get Along, Little Dragon.
Yeah. Referencing the Western aspect, the Get Along, and was it Get Along, Little Doggy? Is that what you call it? You call a cow a doggy?
I guess.
That seems
I actually didn't know that. I just know that expression.
Isn't that what a little doggy is a cow?
I mean, it's not little, and it's not a dog, so that doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
It's much bigger than a dog.
Anyway, moving on.
Jesse Metcalf came with 6 shooters and sorcery, referencing Tiny Epic Western and the sorcery at work in Arcane Academy, as well as Dragon Island. And I thought that was a pretty cool name. BGG user G0, and let me double check that. It's BGG user Glenn, GLENNPP, but listed as G0. First time poster, and hey, you made it in the top 6 right off the bat with Red Dread Diploma. And Sean, you really liked that one.
Yeah, it was my runner-up, in fact.
Very cool.
And of course, Red Dread referencing Red Dread Redemption, which is a cowboy western game. And then
do you mean Red Dead Redemption, good sir?
Oh, sorry, what did I say? Yes, Red Dead Redemption. I've played Red Dead Redemption. Anyway, and the Dread, I think, could apply to the dragons, right? Because they're fearful.
I think it applies to me.
And then, of course, the diploma for Arcane Academy. So, great first effort there. Josh,
with the title Winter is Coming, a nice little Game of Thrones reference, getting to dragons and the fact that it's starting to get chilly. I don't know how it is in New Mexico right now, but it was a little chilly here in St. Louis this past week.
It actually warmed up this week. We've got a week of warmer weather, so I'm kind of bummed for.
I miss the sunshine there, I will say that. We don't get quite as much here as there, but oh well.
And then finally, John Cano suggested Tiles and Tribulations instead of Trials and Tribulations, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, very solid.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for the rest of the top 6. Thanks again to our amazing Board Game Geek Guild for helping us out with the episode. All right, Alex, I'm going to send you to bed.
I need some food, too. I'm going to get some food first, and then I'm going to sleep.
Yeah,
and
you were boiling pasta before we started, and you're like, oh, I got to turn this water off.
Well, I boiled the water. The pasta wasn't in there yet, but
okay.
But
you're going to have to re-boil the water now.
I know. It's such a pain, and you made my electric bill go up by like 5 cents, so I'm going to expect a check in the mail here, Sean.
Oh, okay, so you have electric stovetop?
I think so. It's definitely not gas.
I don't know why we're doing any of this right now. All right, well, that's going to do it then for episode 163. Thanks again to Daniel Newman for titling this episode, Tough the Magic Dragon, Lived by the Sea, and frolicked in a land called Honolulu. Is that how it goes? Something like that. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
Duke you later, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on November 2nd, 2017. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com, and for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Arcane Wonders. You can check out all their awesome titles at PlayTMG.com as well as ArcaneWonders.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, sorry, Mike Fitzgerald, and game on.